Hey everybody, welcome back. This week we're going to discuss what we really need to do to be ready for the next pandemic. Marc Andreessen, venture capitalist, wrote an article this past week called "It's Time to Build." You may have read it or at least heard about it. Well, in it he discusses why we were not ready for this coronavirus pandemic, and the reason he gives is we're simply not building enough. And I totally agree. Here's a great quotation from the article. You don't see the smug complacency, the satisfaction with the status quo, and the unwillingness to build in the pandemic or in healthcare generally. Well, previously in the article, he was discussing we can't even create medical supplies on time. We have the technology to create medical supplies, but we simply can't do it. So he's saying we don't just see this kind of unwillingness to build and this complacency in the healthcare industry. You see it throughout Western life, and specifically throughout American life. Where are the millions of delivery drones? Where are the high-speed trains, the soaring monorails, the hyperloops, and yes, even the flying cars? Well, what's Marc Andreessen talking about here? Psychological concept that all Midwestern dads know is if you're coasting, then you're going downhill. But what the Midwestern dad fails to get at, what Marc Andreessen fails to get at or address in this article is, well, why aren't we building? Why would we coast? He answers it a little bit. He says, well, because we don't want to. We don't want to build. We don't have the desire to build. That's true, but why? Why wouldn't we have the desire to build? I think the answer to this question speaks to an even more fundamental psychological concept that I've talked about before, but it's worth mentioning again. And this psychological concept is the secondary emotional payoff. It is a reward that our brain creates for us that it rewards us for not confronting reality, for not confronting threats, for not getting our needs met, for not building. And there's three attributes to the secondary emotional payoff. The first one is it feels good, but also kind of feels bad. I mean, if you drink alcohol, it feels good and you feel this elation from drinking alcohol, but also, in the back of your mind, this isn't real. This doesn't really feel that good. It definitely doesn't feel the best the next day. But if you don't drink alcohol, just think of stuff in your face with food. If you eat half a cheesecake, it feels good. It's cheesecake. It's awesome. But also you kind of feel like crap, like eating cheesecake and chips on the couch, watching Netflix. Feels good, but also kind of bad. That's a good sign you're in the payoff. Another attribute of the payoff is busyness, always working but never getting anything done, always moving, always doing something but never really accomplishing anything. This is Twitter, Facebook, internet holes, IMDb, Wikipedia, organizing your email inbox, separating everything into a bunch of folders. That's not really doing anything. What you're doing is you're avoiding what you really need to be doing. So you kind of feels good like you're getting something done, but again, not good, because you're not really doing anything. And then the third attribute of the payoff is, it really makes sense out of neurosis. Right? Why would we avoid reality? Why would we act in a way that isn't good for us? Well, we're getting some kind of payoff. And when you insert the secondary emotional payoff into your neurotic loop that you go through over and over again, now it makes sense. Oh, of course you wouldn't avoid, you would want to avoid reality. Of course, okay, so you have a dispute with your neighbor. Of course you wouldn't want to talk to him because now you're justified in sitting at home, eating cheesecake, watching Netflix. Common forms of the secondary emotional payoff, really the only forms I've ever seen, the only forms that really exist are helplessness, victimhood, resentment's a good one, self-righteousness that goes along with resentment, and apathy, just feeling nothing. This is the dark uroboros. I know I talk about the uroboros as in order to get the nutrition from your psychology, you first need to devour yourself. But the dark side of the uroboros is you just devour yourself, right? The snake eating its own tail. You devour yourself, you keep devouring yourself. This is going back and living with your parents for an extended period of time after you turn 18. But I think to really understand the payoff, we have to look at how it would form. And it really forms in childhood where it makes sense to form. You are in a sense rewarding yourself from shutting down from reality, which does make sense when you're 5, 6, 7. You just don't have the psychological, intellectual wherewithal for dealing with reality for what it really is. So if you are confronted with fear and you're isolated, you don't have to necessarily be abused to go into a payoff, but just neglected, nobody to talk to, right? Your parents, adults at that age, are a conduit to reality, are a conduit to confronting reality. And if your parents aren't there, if your caregiver isn't there, you isolate, you're neglected, so you're shut down. So it does make sense to go into some kind of reward for shutting down when you're 5, 6, 7. But what happens when you're an adult, or even 13, 14, 15? Well, it doesn't make sense anymore, because now you have that wherewithal. However, you've already become addicted to these emotional states. So the secondary emotion to payoff when you're 5, 6, 7, chemicals, emotions are chemicals, and we can become addicted to chemicals, we can become addicted to emotions. So we're already addicted to the payoff going into adulthood. Now we're in adulthood thinking that we're confronting reality, getting our needs met, but really what we're doing is we're just justifying getting into what we really want, which is the payoff, right? And then that's what adulthood ends up being. And then it makes much less sense to build to get the reward from that, because we would rather get the reward from staying home, watching Netflix, and doing nothing. But this is what we work on here at Animus, is these fundamental parts of your psychology. I mean, I know people who've been in therapy for years, decades, and they've never heard, forget about what I say, that the secondary emotional payoff, they've never heard that you can reward yourself for acting in a maladaptive way. But we break down fundamental psychological principles here at Animus. Not only that, but we have deconstructed exactly how to talk about them. So we can, light is the best disinfectant, so we can bring as much light, as much awareness to these dark issues, so you can work on them, and then you will go on to not only live however you want, build however you want, but do whatever it is that you want to do with your life. Not for America, not for the West, but more importantly, for yourself. You ever seen a kid, a 12-year-old, who's had a relatively good upbringing up until that point in his life? I think I mentioned this example in Man's Guide to Shame. It doesn't even have to have a good upbringing, just not a bad upbringing. You ever watch what he does? He's confident, he's self-assured, he may be a little bit arrogant, but also he's always building something. He's always working on something. He's in a constant state of action, and not, sorting out your email inbox kind of action, but really working on things that he cares about. This is our natural state. This is what we are without our psychological issues. And I'll leave it there. Like and subscribe, tell a friend, and always remember that if we need somebody to motivate us to build, then we've already lost.